of which makes me an expert on addiction in video games. So that's why I have these illustrious gentlemen here, who are actual smart people, who also happen to love video games. We're here to talk about addiction in video games, and if it's a thing, and how we talk about it, and why it matters, and just sort of cover the breadth of that conversation. We're not going to talk about loot boxes, okay? Let's just address that right now. It's not, they suck, all right? Let's just, all right. Cool. So let's just go right on down the row, and everybody introduce yourselves, and why your particular skill set is relative to this conversation.
Hey guys, I'm James Sherer. I'm a psychiatrist. I work for Rutgers University Hospital, the VA system, and Meridian Health.
I'm Jeff Brewer. I'm a social work student at the University of New England. And so James, as a psychiatrist, is going to be giving medication to people with games addiction. I'll be doing therapy with them.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Holmes. I've been writing about video games for Destructoid and a magazine called Nintendo Force for a little while, and I'm also a licensed independent clinical social worker.
Yeah.
So I've had moms call me up and say, "You gotta get my son off these games. He's playing like 2 hours a day." I'm like, honey,
Right, left.
you only do what I'm doing tonight.
Bless.
So, yes.
2 hours a day. That's precious. Okay, so to make sure we're all on the same page here and we're all singing from the same hymnal, so to speak, let's get the basics down first. So let's talk about what exactly is a psychiatrist.
Thank you, Susan. I have a slideshow that will answer just that question.
Let's go to the slideshow.
All right. So I'm a psychiatrist, and psychiatrists can be many things. You know, are we more like the Sigmund Freud type on the left side here, where we sit down with a patient, we meet with them for hours a week, we drill down, we figure out every single trauma that happened in their childhood and how much they want to kill their father and have sex with their mother? Or are we more like Oliver Sacks, this gentleman in the middle here, who combined neurology and psychiatry? He's looking pretty good there, right? Yeah.
I was going to say, I need therapy.
Yeah. So do we combine neurology and psychiatry? Do we come up with new medications? Or are we the kind of people who strap people down and give them ECT against their will, like you see here, Jack Nicholson getting it in the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Or are we more like Dr. Mario throwing pills? Because someone has got to treat Yoshi's crippling depression.
ECT being?
ECT being electroconvulsive therapy.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm all of those things. I do all of those things. I'm also an author. You can find Word Wisdom on Amazon. I wrote a chapter in an absolute addiction textbook. It's coming out this year. I wrote the LGBTQ chapter in that book. I have another textbook coming out in 2020. Why should you care who I am, who we are, and what we do? Well, psychiatrists, in addition to everything we just talked about, we also work in emergency room settings, where we see thousands and thousands of patients in crisis.
I'm gonna ask you to pause for 1 second. Can
Yes.
everybody hear him okay, or is it a little, because you're kind of eating your mic here a bit?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to back off.
There
Thank
go.
you, Susan.
All right.
All right. So we work in emergency rooms. So if you're feeling like you're overwhelmed, you're feeling like you might want to hurt yourself or someone else, either the police or EMS is going to take you to an emergency room. And before you can leave that emergency room, you're going to need to be seen by a psychiatrist. It might be me if you're in New Jersey. And that psychiatrist is going to have to make the determination whether or not you're an imminent threat to yourself or others. And psychiatrists have the legal authority to commit people that they think are imminent threats to themselves, others, in New Jersey property. I personally do not act on that last one. But psychiatrists also have the ability in 35 states to commit people involuntarily for treatment if they're addicted to something. That is to say, if you come into an emergency room in this state, in Massachusetts, and you have an opioid addiction, but nothing else is wrong with you, it is feasible that a psychiatrist may say, I'm essentially arresting you, you're staying in this hospital for treatment. That can be a little bit worrisome because psychiatrists need, like myself, need to make that decision very quickly and often with almost no information. When I was working in the Rutgers emergency room in October, I saw over 1,000 patients. Of those 1,000, 300 needed acute inpatient care, so over 300 I deemed needed to come to the hospital for help. Around 100, 150 of them, unfortunately, I had to do involuntarily. So I essentially told them, I don't think you're safe to leave, by New Jersey law, you need to stay, you're going to stay with us for this long, so on and so forth.
Let me ask you a question, since you talked about presenting as a danger to yourself or others or property, which again is a New Jersey thing and other state, varies state by state. So if someone brings in their teenage kid, for example, who has been throwing the controller or wants to, we've been there, right? Like, or wants to, smash the TV or something, could that qualify?
So it depends. I don't think that behavior on its own could qualify, but certainly if there were other associated behaviors, and it's sad to say, but also depending on the psychiatrist, it could change. So just like, everyone likes to think that the law is completely impartial. It's not. Depending on the judge you get, the outcome could be entirely different. If you come into the emergency room and it's me, and I don't like to commit people, I'm going to find a reason to let you go. If you come into the emergency room and it's an 80-year-old dude who doesn't know what video games are, all he's hearing is that his kid is destroying his parents' house, he might think, oh my goodness, this kid really needs help, and I need to keep him. And that goes along with why I'm worried about all this, because psychiatrists, by and large, don't understand gaming, they didn't grow up with it, they don't care about it, they don't understand why it can be beneficial. Psychiatrists think of all addictions, more or less, in a similar way. And the way that we think about them is by looking at them almost like the opioid epidemic, because that's what we deal with on an everyday basis. How do we treat the opioid epidemic? We treat it with medications. And right now, there are studies being done and people being treated for internet gaming disorder with medications. In some cases, the same medications that we might use for opioid addiction, believe it or not. And, I'm worried about this because a psychiatrist who doesn't understand what we do and what we love, I don't want people to be medicated for enjoying our hobby. So it's a little concerning. I love video games so much that in 2014, I was here, and I ruined one of Jonathan Holmes' videos. I'm so sorry. I have evidence of it here.
You're not that sorry.
I'm not that sorry at all. It was the highlight of my time here. Here we go. Ready?
Going on here. It looks well populated. People eating lunch. People talking to each other, checking out the various booths. Here, come on. Let's take a look at it together.
Yeah, I did that. I'm not sorry, actually.
It's amazing you can make me talk like that.
The power of technology. All right, so how do psychiatrists know? How are we going to know when to treat, when to not treat? How are we going to know when video games should be seen as something, a harmless hobby that we enjoy and we benefit from? And how are we going to know, our older psychiatrists that aren't enjoying what we enjoy, how are they going to know to separate video games out of violence, truancy, frivolity, and drugs? Which is honestly how I think a fair number of them are going to see it. And to that end, passing it over to Jeff Brewer.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about right now what is the standard that we use to diagnose people. So the standard that we use is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And a lot of people might have heard of the DSM, but they don't quite know what it is. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the DSM just so we can kind of understand that and how that is a basis for conversation. A little bit. Don't you worry, Susan. Don't you worry. So basically, the DSM was born out of a need for a shared language around mental health diagnoses. And the reason we need that is because mental health diagnoses are unlike other medical diagnoses. So if you have diabetes, I can give you, or rather, James can give you a test because he's an MD, and basically take your blood and look at your blood and say, you have diabetes. We have no test for depression. We have no test for anxiety. We can look at a brain with depression or anxiety and say it looks different, but we don't know medically and biologically exactly what's going on. So really what the DSM is a list of guesses about what different kinds of mental illnesses can be. So depression is just something a bunch of psychiatrists got in a room and agreed was a certain set of symptoms. So really what the DSM is, it's a list of criteria to help diagnose different mental illnesses. And Ryan Gosling has all the criteria that you could ever need. So the problem with this is that when you get a bunch of people in a room doing decisions about what is and isn't correct behavior, sometimes they screw up. So some of you may know that homosexuality used to be considered a mental illness, along with transvestitism, and along with hysteria. So hysteria, you might have heard that word thrown around, actually used to refer to what people thought was a condition of the uterus in women, which made them behave irrationally.
It's actually called men.
Fortunately, these are both no longer in the DSM, But the point I'm trying to make here is that anytime that we don't have a biological basis for illness, we're susceptible to societal norms and pressures. So what does the DSM say about video games right now? So, okay, fun fact about this picture. So I was looking for images about video game addiction, and I really wanted Waluigi to be in them. And I found this thumbnail from a 20-minute long YouTube video that somebody made about Wario's strange addiction, and I would love to invite the audience to guess what Wario's strange addiction is.
Coins. Tacos. Coins. Water. Good guess.
You're all wrong, it was butt sniffing. You should watch it, it's compelling. I tried. Anyway, so right now, the DSM has internet gaming addiction listed as a topic for further study. So it hasn't been enshrined in the main body yet, but it is something that psychiatrists are interested in. And so it's a behavioral addiction, and right now there's only one behavioral addiction, it's gambling disorder in the DSM. And basically all the behavioral addictions they suggested copy those criteria. So I'm going to go through them really quickly. Don't worry, Susan. Before you know it.
If there is no currently agreed upon, this is gaming addiction.
Yep.
Does that just mean that I rock up to the emergency room and it's a best guess? People go, yes, you seem addicted to me.
You're describing psychiatry and all it's best guesses.
Got it.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Correct.
So anyway, so the criteria, and I'll talk about how I feel about these in a second, but I'm going to give you some of the most important criteria. So one is withdrawal symptoms when not gaming, so that's pretty self-evident. It's, you're sad when you're not gaming, you feel the need to do it again. Tolerance might seem a little weird for a behavior, but basically it just means that you need to do more of the same behavior to have the same effect.
Interesting.
Yeah. Giving up other activities for gaming, damage to job or mood from gaming, and lying about the amount of time spent gaming. So what's wrong with these criteria? So Susan, you kind of hit on this actually. But it harkens back to the original. Yeah, no, this is a great picture. So Jonathan actually found this wonderful article full of news pieces from the past that just talked about how horrible gaming was. But basically, we have a history in psychiatry and other mental health professions of moralizing when we define mental illness. And we also medicalize when we moralize. And so, interesting fact, alongside gaming addiction, one of the suggested behavioral addictions for the DSM-5 was excessive tanning disorder. Just gonna let that sink in for a second. So I'm not arguing that excessive tanning cannot be a bad behavior, an addictive behavior, but it is peculiar what rose to the surface when these conversations break out. It seems like technology is a common boogeyman. So I think that gaming addiction is a real thing, and I think we need to treat it, but I do think that the people who come up with the definitions don't really understand how much screens have become a part of our lives. Like I personally get in front of a screen like 6 to 8 hours a day, and I think I'm not alone. I don't think I'm addicted. And I think it's really important that we bring people who play games and have been exposed to games to the table when we're talking about games addiction.
Can we go back to the previous slide that had the criteria? The first question is, does it have to exhibit all of those, or?
No, so that's a good question, Susan. So, for example, let's say you have withdrawal symptoms, you have tolerance, but you're not lying about the amount of time you're spending, you might still meet the criteria. And again, the challenge with this, right, is that if I see a provider, or rather, if someone is referred to a provider, because many of the people who are referred are young, and their behavior is described, that provider has immense latitude to decide whether or not their gaming habits are problematic. And the standard should really be if they're creating actual problems in your life. But that's not the standard that all practitioners use.
Let's just take a look at this real quick. Hands up if you think any of those apply to you about books. Has anyone ever said you're addicted to reading?
Fun fact, Susan.
Yeah.
Actually, books, when books were becoming popular, people were afraid of books. Book addiction was a thing.
Wow, okay.
I am not joking.
That's where we're at.
That kind of puts it in context.
So, anyway, I'm going to pass it over to Jonathan here.
Oh, great.
Okay, well so we've talked about why we should be having this conversation to begin with, and then we touched on, well, how are people coming to this decision that, oh, this is addictive or this is not. Let's now, with Jonathan, talk about why games could even be addictive.
Great, thanks Susan. Yeah, so I've had the benefit of working in the field for about 15 years. And like I was joking about before, I have had mostly people's parents call me and say, like, is my son addicted, can you get him to stop, even if he's not addicted? Because I'd just rather he didn't. And then you have to have a family meeting, and it gets complicated. But like Jeff was saying, video game addiction, like gambling addiction, can be a biochemical event. And if you're concerned at all for yourself about, is this addictive behavior, I would suggest you look at how often you're in a fight or flight state while you're playing video games, because that's where you get these stimulant spikes in your brain. The way gambling addiction works and the way a lot of video games work, I know we're not supposed to talk about loot boxes, but they do work as gambling does, in that moment before you're about to find out in a random event if you win or not, your brain releases a stimulant. And some people get chemically addicted to that stimulant. So they're buying scratch tickets every day, they've never won, they don't enjoy it. But the act of scratching, they get a high off of that.
It feels so good.
So that's the biochemical part. Attached to that is also your idea of yourself as a person. Now, I've been writing about video games for like 10 years. I've wanted to stop. But when I sit down at my computer, like I'm way more addicted to writing about video games than I am playing video games. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Susan. So I'll sit down at the computer and I'll be like, who am I in front of this computer on a subconscious level? Am I going to be a guy who's just, surfing the internet? Or am I going to like write something that thousands of people are going to read? I'll be drawn to just like write about stuff that I'm maybe not even initially that interested in, because my identity has gotten tied to that over the past 10 years, like a large part of my adulthood. And how many video games are like, take care of this cute person, or these are your new virtual friends, or these are your real friends you've only met on Fortnite. But now my identity is attached to like, this is my clan, this is my... It's all been surfing up since the Xbox days, where achievements got introduced and people were being subtly trained to define their worth by how good they are at games. Well, that's how they hook you, and sometimes. And that's less, again, biochemical addiction, and that's more compulsion based on how you identify. Yeah, that too. Yeah, thank you. So, on the other hand, if you find yourself in the flow state a lot while you're playing a game and it just feels really good, who here has heard of the flow state before? Oh, quite a few of you. It gets thrown around a lot, especially by like hoity-toity intellectual types who are thinking about video games and why they work. But if you get into the flow state through a game like, an example is Res or Tetris Effect, particularly the mode where there's no fight or flight, there's a no-lose mode in Tetris Effect. You can just keep stacking the blocks, and then when you get to the top, you start over, and you never get a game over, you never get told you're bad. So you can just get in that flow state, there's no fight or flight. Your brain waves actually change to something called theta waves, and you become more creative and more interesting. So if I play Tetris Effect for like 30 minutes and then go to a party, I come up with better jokes. Because you tap into your subconscious, you get rid of your self-consciousness, which is fight or flight, and you're not worried about like how you look anymore, you just get into your creative zone. So on the other hand, playing video games can actually be really healthy for you. So that's enough out of me.
So, something you mentioned about it's your identity, being a writer. And it's pretty obvious, I think, a lot of us identify as gamers, and we consider gaming a big part of what makes us, us. How do you know when that is hurting you? Like, what are some signs, like, oh, maybe I'm too wrapped up in being a gamer, that it's telling you that it's maybe becoming an addiction as opposed to just something you enjoy?
Right. I can take this if you want. So basically, I think that the golden criteria for any kind of addiction should be, are you doing it even though it's making your life worse? So are you playing games into the dead of night even though you're failing school, even though you have been warned at your job? Are you losing friends because all you do is play games all the time? I think that, would you guys agree that's kind of the golden standard?
I'll tell a quick personal story. I was supposed to pick my wife up at the train station, and I desperately wanted a drift bloom in Pokemon.
So cute.
And I was like, go pick up my wife for a drift bloom. And I had to like make a serious, and I realized, wait a minute, I put 200 hours into this game already. I'm not getting anything new. I can go look at a picture of a drift bloom online if I want to. This is like not healthy for me, so I picked that down. I put that down and then picked up Pokemon Black and White like 2 years after that. And caught them all. So one of the things that's lucky for me in my like short bouts of being addicted to a game, when I beat it, I luckily can usually put it down. I did actually catch them all to Gen 5, and then I'm like, all right, you know, putting that down. There's so many games these days that are endless, and you've never caught them all. Or we just introduced 20 more, you know, and you only need to buy the season pass for $20 in order to get it. So if you want to think about who the enemy is in your life when it comes to potential game addiction, there's a reason Konami is just making pachinko machines now. Like, they want us addicted, and they have meetings about it, like what's going to be the most, and they don't feel any moral qualms about it. And our brains are susceptible to stuff. Like, anything that can make your life really good, like a game, can also make it really bad because they're that powerful. So
Along those lines, you know, something that I treat every day, opioid addiction, heroin addiction, you know, prescription opioid addiction, there's a big difference between when you start and you're using to get high and when you're using to not go into withdrawal. And I feel like with people who game, in certain circumstances, not all, which is why this is a very nuanced topic because all games are different. Being addicted to Candy Crush is not the same as being addicted to WoW. Speaking of WoW, I have a friend who, he's a very high level guy in WoW, he raids. And apparently WoW has changed now where you have to do these chores every day just to kind of keep up with what's going on in the game. And does he find those fun? No. But he has to do them or else he loses his status. And I think, you know, that's where it comes into play.
Good point. Yeah.
So, going on Jonathan's point about playing Pokemon until it's done, and then moving on, is it possible to have transitory addiction? Can you be addicted and then be okay? I mean, because like that's not happening with heroin. What is a heroin addict for the summer, you know?
yeah, that's part of why I'm still reticent to use the term addiction. I think compulsion, 9 times out of 10, is the term you want to use. Unless somebody says like, I was playing Candy Crush, I don't even remember what happened. I like got such a high off of the score I got.
I woke up in a hotel in New York.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that it's a biochemical addiction in my experience anyway, in my 15 years in the field. I've seen people be more compulsive about going to church, about having sex, about reading books, I've seen all these other things because they're culturally accepted. Like Susan and I grew up at a time, not to age you, Susan.
I'm old as dirt, it's fine.
There was no PAX. If I went to school and said, hey guys, playing some video games, I got eggs thrown at me and no one sat with me at lunch. Like, I only played video games because I didn't care if anyone liked me or not. Because you're a son of your own death warrant in terms of your social status. Now, kids are doing the Fortnite dance and blah, blah, blah. So it's totally different in terms of whether you're going to be accepted and get to that identity aspect where you like who you are when you play games more. I always had to question, like, am I wasting my time, blah, blah, blah. But I loved them so much, I did them anyway. So I think games are moving towards being more compulsive in that way, but it's still pretty fresh and new that the game developers have found ways to tie our identities this deeply to the action of pressing buttons and looking at Solid Snake show his butt to me for the third time.
I think another aspect of that question, Susan, is that, you know, we used to view psychiatrists, used to view addiction in this country in extremely stark terms. If you're an alcoholic for life. Even if you're not drinking, even if you're 30 years sober, you're an alcoholic. At least that was the paradigm that was taught under, 12-step programs and all of that. We're finally, like just now, starting to leave that behind.
Interesting.
Yeah, so for the first time ever, the FDA is approving studies for alcohol use disorder where the treatment goal is not complete abstinence. Before, if you wanted your study funded by the FDA, your goal needed to be, the person is not going to drink anymore. We're finally, in 2019, starting to say, you know what? Maybe if you cut down from, 20 drinks a day to 3 or 4, maybe that's...
You're not mine. Don't judge.
Yeah, so I think that's it's an important thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the difference between a compulsion and an addiction, because to me as a layperson, That's the same thing.
Oh, okay. Sure. So I'd love to get your opinions on this. I don't consider myself an expert on this exactly, but it does come up a lot. Compulsion is more about what drives you to do it in the first place. Like, I wake up in the morning, I just want to read the video game news. That happens to me every day. So before I think about, like, is that really the most responsible thing I can do right now? I'm already reading the video game news. So many people have a compulsive habit around social media. How many people, like, just check their Twitter or a little bit of their Facebook while they're driving? So many people. So that's the drive to do it, whereas addiction is more about when can you stop? Like, if I realize, oh, there's a cop around the corner, can I just stop checking my Facebook right now behind the wheel? Or, God damn that cop, I don't care. I need to know what's going on behind the channel right now. Then you're maybe addicted. That's my take on it. What do you guys think?
Wow.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So most addictions also are compulsive. Like, I was just looking at the Fagerstrom, I think it's called. There's a 5-question test you can take online to see if you're addicted to cigarettes. And it's not just do you smoke every day, it's like, what cigarette would you give away, would you give up first? Your morning cigarette or your end of the day cigarette? And the people who say, I need my morning cigarette, are technically more addicted than people who don't. And that is carried across to other things. So if you're like, I need my morning Susan Arendt Twitter feed, I need to know what joke she's telling right now, then you may be addicted to Susan Arendt.
Another way to think about it is
There's no cure for that.
I've had patients who suffer from, addictions tell me, I've asked them to describe, how does it feel like? How does it feel like to have a craving? How does it feel like to need it? Because honestly, I don't think that I've ever experienced that. And they tell me, a lot of times they know that I'm in residency, they know that I'm going after, I've got my MD, but I'm going after a fellowship, and they tell me, you know that feeling when like you're going for like your degree and you would do anything to get it? Anything. That's what it's like to have a true addiction. Whereas a compulsion, for example, obsessive compulsive disorder, those people have thoughts to do things, touch a doorknob, wash their hands, and they have this foreboding feeling that if they do not do those things, something bad will happen. Sometimes they have a concrete idea of what would happen. Like if I don't wash my hands 30 times, I'm going to get a germ, I'm going to get infected, I'm going to die. Sometimes they don't have an idea of what would happen. It's just a foreboding feeling, and the way to relieve that feeling is to do the action. So that's another difference.
That's such a great point. Who here has bought an Amiibo before? Who here has bought an Amiibo because you thought, if I don't buy this Amiibo, I'm going to feel a deep sense of loss? Because it's going to never be seen again, I'm going to be dreaming of Wii Fit Trainer being on my desk. And then you buy it and you don't even take it out of the box. I have like 10 in my closet right now.
I have an entire storage container of unopened Amiibo boxes in my attic right now, and my wife is very mad at me.
They got us. They were designing that compulsion into us, and they got
Got me
me.
the whole Smash Brothers collection. It just keeps growing. Everyone is here.
So one thing I do want to talk about is, because people, we've done, oh, you're a gardening addict, you're out there every weekend, right? So let's get into maybe some more specifics. How do you start differentiating between, this is my hobby, and I love it, and I do it a lot because I have friends, it rewards me socially, it's relaxing, it's whatever, versus this is replacing something in your life that should be made up from other things?
I would say it's pretty tricky actually, because as you said, Susan, gaming can be like a pro-social behavior, right? So maybe someone who struggles in kind of IRL social situations might, find an MMO where they meet a friend group that's really supportive to them. And it's really hard to kind of parse, like looking at the whole constellation of that person's life. Is this on balance a good or a bad thing?
I want to piggyback off that if I can. So I presented some research at the American Academy of Addiction Psychiatry this December. I kind of told the story of a few of my patients in the VA system who were, I would say, truly addicted to games. One of which was a gentleman who had other mental illnesses, but he played Black Desert Online, which is a Korean MMO, I believe, and it was exactly that. This is, unfortunately, mental illness hampers people's ability to make friends, to be sociable, and so in real life, he had extremely low self-esteem, but in Black Desert Online, he was incredible. He was a guild leader, he was like the man to go to, and to further that feeling, despite the fact that he was broke, he spent $10,000 on I don't even know what it was. Like, he didn't tell me exactly. Like, it sounded like armor or something. I'm not sure. But he spent $10,000, and he couldn't afford food or a place to live. I would say that's certainly a sign of addiction.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sometimes it's stark, but sometimes it's hard. I mean, you could be just kind of floundering, but you're happy with the game. I mean, it's really difficult, I think, to separate it out. And I think that clinicians are quick to jump to a conclusion.
I think, those are all great points. If you can draw an analogy between your gaming use and the relationship with a person or a job you're having, and if you're getting more out of it than you're putting in, there may not be a compulsion. There may be just a logical, sound, healthy reason why you enjoy the game so much. Because games really are about relationships. Like a well-designed game, you put stuff into the game gives you something back, and you have a back and forth. And one of the things I love about games, sidebar, is I've gotten to know a lot of game developers just through their games. Like I was just talking to Tommy Reffinis, who made Super Meat Boy. He just is so much a Super Meat Boy, if you get to know him. So he puts so much of his own personality in that game, it feels like you already know him if you play this game. So like any relationship, if it's unhealthy, it's going to be difficult because you wouldn't have stayed in it in the first place if it didn't feel good. But games are designed to, like I keep harping on, they're relationships where we end up giving hundreds of dollars and got back like a few hours of fun. And it's not always a healthy trade-off the way they're designed these days. But they do this fight or flight thing where they start off sweet, like so many bad relationships I've had, and then they get sour, and then the sourness leaves you hungry for sweetness again. And the dysfunctional relationships I've had, the person will have a fight with me and tell me I'm the worst and blah, blah, blah. And then they'll hold the carrot over my head being like, and if you want to like yourself again, you've got to make up with me and give me some gift in return. Anyone been in a bad relationship before, gamers? It happens to us sometimes. And games do the same thing to me too. Like I lost again and again and again. I feel terrible about myself. So I keep playing, and then now do you want to just, well, take $2 of your dollars and you can insta-win. Oh, that's tempting because I want to like myself again. If you find yourself doing that, then you've been caught. And it doesn't mean you're an addict, doesn't mean you're a faulty person. Again, the fault is on the designers of these games that are trying to get into our heads and get our money out of our wallets for them. So don't let them win is my advice. Just play Tetris Effect.
And just very quickly, just to tell you guys what you're up against, if you don't think that some of these game companies have teams of psychologists and behaviorists who are looking into what sound will get you, what color will get you, what reward schedule, Jonathan touched on that briefly, an irregular reward schedule. In other words, if you press a button and you don't know when you're going to get rewarded, that is reinforced stronger than if you press a button and every time you get a reward. That's just a fact. So that's what you're up against. And I was actually playing Overwatch with one of the devs of Disc Jam. And I told him I'm going to go to PAX and I'm going to give this panel on games addiction. And he's like, do you want to come to GDC and give that a panel, but to us, to devs, to teach us how to get people addicted? He was joking.
He was not joking.
But I think that is where some of the devs heads are at, because if they can hook you, it's good for them.
Also, just food for thought. People, like other companies and other media or segments of the market have recognized how addictive games are. That's why gamification is such a huge trend. We know that we can make you exercise if we put a game on it, which is, I would never exercise without a game, so I understand.
How many of you have played Peggle? So yeah, you know the little ding, 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 ding noise when the ball's there? Yeah, psychologists designed that, specifically that series of tones to make you happier when you hear it. So, yeah. I just want to share my own personal story of something that from the surface, from the outside, absolutely looked like gaming addiction, but was not. I was many years ago, way back when I was in Muggle land, before I actually wrote about video games for a living, I lost my job, and I was unemployed for a year. And I was looking every day, and I wasn't getting anywhere, If any of you who've ever been unemployed, you know the self-respect spiral that goes into why my wife's going to be calling me, am I worthless, am I just terrible, I'm doing everything wrong, I'm never going to get a job, I'm going to go, right? And I played Morrowind on Xbox, and I would get up and I would spend an hour doing job-related stuff, and then I would play Morrowind for 12 hours straight. Because being in that world separated me from the pressure of, man, get a job, oh my God, you're gonna lose your house, like that. I could fully divorce my brain from that pressure and just exist. And that kept me okay over the course of the year while I was in this horrible unemployment situation. Someone who doesn't know me, oh my God, all that girl does is sit on the couch and play Morrowind all day. So it's all about context, and it's about who you were before and who you are after, and what you're trying to achieve during.
Sure. Susan, I had a similar story. So cat owners, or rather non-cat owners, won't understand. But I lost my cat, and I was devastated. Fortunately, she came back a month later. But during that month...
Oh, I thought you meant Jesus.
Way to bury the lead.
During that month...
Don't do that, man!
During that month, just to keep my mind off of it, I played The Binding of Isaac for something like 400 hours. I did not drop any balls, but I played it basically in all of my free time. And it's kind of a flow state game, Jonathan, because it's just all about permutations, right? And it was just a way to keep my mind occupied, and never did I feel like it crossed over to a point where it was harming me. But anyone from the outside would have been like, what is this kid doing?
Well, that brings back to the moralizing. Like, we're all gonna die. You guys all knew that, right?
What?
It's a bummer. And Erickson, you guys are fun. So there's a psychologist, Erickson, came up with these 8 stages of psychological development. And most of us in this room are probably in between intimacy versus isolation, which a lot of games have been designed to help us feel like we're meeting that need, and sometimes we meet it genuinely. Identity versus role confusion, which comes a little before that. Do we like ourselves? Well, I got 500 achievements today, so I guess I do. So they're designed to try to get us there too. And generativity versus stagnation is the stage I'm in. It's where most folks 30 and above are in until they get to the last stage, which is integrity versus despair. And a lot of people might feel despair if they look back on their life and think, who booed despair? Good for you. Did I waste my life playing video games? And so many psychiatrists I know, and parents I know, and they're both very paternal, right, a lot of the time, they look at what their kids are doing and they're like, I don't want him to regret his or her life. So I want them to stop playing these video games, because if they only saw it was a waste of time like I do, then they would be happier. I want them to be in generativity versus stagnation. They see the video games as stagnation. I didn't define generativity. Do you all know? That's like making stuff, doing things, making money. There's no making money.
Achieving things.
Yeah, but you know things. I know way more people. Again, I happen to know a lot of rich people for whatever reason, and they get so addicted to making money. Yeah. They don't need any more money anymore, but nobody says to them, like, stop being rich, son. They're all like psyched, like, are you gonna buy me a house now? Whereas when they look back on it, they may be like, so I got all the money, no one else has any more, I took it all, what did I actually do? Whereas if they had been playing Animal Crossing all day, sending letters to their friends, I think they'd be a higher quality of life myself.
So I wanna,
it's me moralizing now.
Isabella's adorable.
Isabella is bae.
Play Smash and say that again.
He's not wrong. We're gonna do some audience questions if y'all wanna line up here at this wonderful mic. While you're all doing that, one quick question for you guys. We're gonna kind of lightning round it a little bit. Okay, is it okay to be addicted if you don't really have, like, if you're a kid and you don't have a job, and assuming you're not failing out of school, does it really matter?
No.
I would dispute, I don't think addicted is the right word to describe that behavior, but I think a lot of parents think so. And interestingly, the primary demographic that are referred for games addiction are 12 to 20-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a 3-year-old. He loves Kirby's Planet Robobot. I didn't buy the game, but we have the demo. We played that demo. I like keep it on the 3DS. I never close the game because we only get 20 tries on it. We played it at least 150 times. It's just always running on my 3DS. Anyway, his hand-eye coordination is better. He's like forming relationships with the characters. He's like making up fan fiction about them at 3 already. So that's much better than if he was just like, I'm getting that money, Dad. I don't care about the human race. I don't care about creativity. It's all about me. He's already becoming like empathetic and also like pretty skilled.
He's absorbing.
Susan, real quick.
Yeah.
Before we get to the questions, I did want to just say a couple more things. So, if you're struggling, it doesn't have to be with addiction. If you're struggling with depression, anxiety, anything, the first thing to know is that asking for help is not a sign of weakness. And the second thing to know is how to ask for help. Many hospitals associated with universities have low or free behavioral health care available to you. If you have health insurance, you can go to your insurance's website, like Aetna.com, and you can search for providers in your area. You can use Psychology Today, either in like the actual issue or online. There's a huge database of providers, what they specialize in, where they are. And if you're in crisis, call 1-800-273-TALK, 8255, or 911, or go to the nearest emergency room.
Hold on for just a second. Take a picture of that. Just have it in your phone. If you never personally need it, that's great, but you will run into someone who does. I promise you that is true.
And we all benefit from it. Even if you don't think you need it, trust me, it'll help. And now we have just really quick a few shameless plugs.
Oh, okay, we're doing shameless plugs now.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
that's cool.
get to the end and we'll go
Okay.
full questions. So I have a podcast with another psychiatrist at my program called.
Maybe he has to go back a slide.
Whoa.
For pictures.
Here we go. Go for
You
it.
can talk about the psychiatrist's guide as...
Yeah.
it's
The
fun.
Psychiatrist Guide is a podcast where we get experts in the field, like talking heads, like the kind of people who go on CNN and talk about addiction and things like that. We talk to them, we try to keep it lighthearted. If you're interested in psychiatry, you're thinking maybe I want a future in mental health, give it a listen, it's good. Also, me and this guy have been doing a podcast for a really long time called Boss Barrel Radio. If you want to, it's headed up by our friend Griffin. He is like the boss of it. If you want to hear 3 idiots talk about games and sometimes talk about mental health, that's good. And then Susan.
Oh, hey, so I'm editor-in-chief of D-Zone, which is a knowledge repository for developers and programmers. So if you code, you will probably find some cool stuff there. If you want to learn how to do things, that's a great place to do it. We also have a podcast. I'm not on it, but that's okay. I'm on a different one. I'm on a Continue podcast, which is ostensibly about video games, but it's not really. It's just 3 idiots talking about the stuff that we like every other week. So look us up.
Woo.
Oh, and as for me, Nintendo Force, it's a print magazine. Every issue comes with a double-sided poster. I don't know why we don't have like 100,000 subscribers. Like, I don't like anything I do. I'm gonna watch this video later and hate myself for like all the words that I said. I think this magazine's really good. I don't know why. So yeah, look at it. Nintendo Force. If you like
What are you
Nintendo,
people doing?
Yeah,
what are you
Subscribe
doing?
now.
And I started writing and drawing. You put that slide there. A silly Castlevania humor comic that is now appearing in the magazine.
Yes.
And on seats everywhere.
Yes.
Yes.
And last thing, shameless plugs.
So, for Q&A, a question is an interrogative. It has a question mark at the end. It is not more of a story or a comment, but no, we don't do that. And you get one. If it is for anybody in particular, please direct it to them. Otherwise, it will go to the entire group. Go.
This is not for anyone in particular. We are obviously not the only country in the world, and so I'm wondering, are there other countries or international organizations like the EU or the World Health Organization, and on, that have said things on mood?
So all the research comes from other countries. Because like we, you know, one of the crazy things about psychiatry is that I'm free. So for example, sertraline is a medication for depression or anxiety, but I'm free as a provider to prescribe it for anything. And if I justify it, no one's going to question me. So if a psychiatrist thinks that he or she can treat gaming disorder with methadone, they can do it. And so these types of studies are being done in other countries, starting slowly to happen here. But really, pretty much every piece of evidence you're going to find, if you go on PubMed, which is like a database of studies, is going to be from the Netherlands or somewhere else.
And it's worth noting that the WHO last year listed internet gaming addiction as a disorder.
But just internet gaming addiction.
Yes, so there's the rub there, right? Internet gaming specifically, so MMOs,
Right.
those types of games. This is where it's been helpful to have gamers at the table to differentiate between different types of gaming.
Thank you.
My question is for the panel at large, and forgive me if you already answered it, and I just threw it in my head, but what about when you use it for coping mechanism, and then you just go into that spiral, but i.e., your girlfriend breaks up with you, you lost your job, I went through that, I lost a job for a year, went in the spiral, and nothing but gaming, and then it's just like, I'm at times that it wasn't even doing anything but gaming. So when do you
Differentiate.
Yeah.
words.
Between
Yeah.
coping and not coping.
Yeah. Between like using it as just something as a pick-me-up and, oh God, I need this to live.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd say all addiction starts as a way to cope with being alive. And then from there, it cascades sometimes. But you guys are welcome to weigh in.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was a slide back there about addiction. When self-medication, pleasure-seeking, and having it be a big part of your identity all combine, that's when you're more likely to be intensely compulsive about something or even addicted about it. So if you're just self-medicating the fact that life is really bad and you're not losing anything because of it, you're not, like video games, I'm still so surprised so many people don't like them because they're so good, right? Like nothing bad has ever happened to me when I played a video game. I've gone to churches where people have like called me all sorts of names, and I've read books where I was like deeply disturbed afterwards and like felt like I was gonna throw up. I saw Saving Private Ryan, I felt bad for a week. Like that's, personally hasn't happened to me with games because you have so much autonomy and there's always this knowledge like this isn't real. Like it feels really real.
Have you been on Xbox Live?
I actually, yeah.
Have you tried being a woman online?
Very good. Well, yes, point taken. So, yeah, I guess my long-winded point is video games are generally, I don't think people usually have to worry about unless you're getting to the point where, like James was saying, you're losing money, you're losing friends. You have to take inventory every once in a while about the pros and cons of all your behaviors.
What's a good check-in with yourself? Like just like back of the envelope, kind of like, okay, you're sitting there wondering, okay, I haven't left the house for 3 days because I'm bummed out because X happened in my life. How would you check in with yourself?
I think real quick, and I touched upon it briefly, addiction in a lot of ways is about self-esteem. So if you're playing a game and you feel worse about yourself, that's a warning sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look back and say, out of the past 2 hours, I enjoyed 3 minutes of it, yeah, that happens. And I get so sad for people. Not because I don't want them to play games. I want them to play games they like. And when I know people like, I spent 40 hours on this RPG, it's just starting to get good. And I'm like, there was like $22 games I could have you played Downwell? Like, I've never had a bad time playing Downwell. Binding of Isaac, like, you could have done so many other things. But yeah, if you have to take honest inventory about why you're doing something and if you're getting anything out of it.
Yeah, it's also important to know that a lot of us will turn to games. We love games, and we expect the game to fix the thing. And it's important to recognize I am going through the motions because it's supposed to be making me happy. If it's not, something else is broken. And you should deal with that, right? Like when you're depressed and you'll turn to the game and the game is not doing it for you, then stop playing the game. Because the game's never going to be able to do it for you in that particular instance.
That's an important point, Susan. So it's really important that we know that addiction often co-occurs with other mental illness. So usually if someone is using something compulsively, they're trying to cope with something. And it's important to treat that too.
Excellent question, wherever you went.
Excellent. Jordan Cameron. One will be, we pretty much covered my question, as I am showing past. If there's a big rate of comorbidity with mental illnesses and video game addiction. So, thank you very much for that. You read my mind.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Psychic powers, another aspect of gaming. No, okay.
So I want to touch on that real quick. A lot of these parents who have called me and said like, fix my son, a lot of time the real issue with the kid who's playing too many video games and stealing their mom's money is personality disorders. If you have narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder, there's a lot of games out there that are going to reward that. There's just a few like sociopath simulators out there. I don't know if you've seen them. And you can also just go online and be awful to people for as long as you want. So like the underlying problem is your kid is a very mean person and he's stealing money from you. He's telling me in therapy like he enjoys it when you cry. So that's probably a bigger problem than World of Warcraft is that your son hates people. Why don't you take him to like an adventure course or something like that? And I've seen those actually help. Like even if you have antisocial personality disorder or narcissism, if you can develop rewards from social engagement and like yourself out in the world and like it when you make other people happy and that becomes your new rule set. Who here has heard of Super Better by Jane McGonigal? She gamified mental health and how to like yourself in any situation by using a game system. It made a book and a website about it. I think the website might be free. I definitely check that out in terms of how to make gaming healthy for you if you're interested. Sorry. Okay.
Question for the panel. What do you think is the responsibility of the people who are developing the games to sort of consider positive feedback loops? And it seems like a lot of developers today are going in with the mindset of we want to get people hooked, we want to focus on capturing the whales, as it were, and make people spend money.
It's the casino question.
Yeah, it's the casino question.
Great question.
I want them to all ask themselves how much money they need. How addicted are you to money? Multi-million-dollar guy who hasn't created anything in a long, long time, if ever, just sitting in his mansion complaining on Twitter. How much money do you need when you're creating this?
Who could you be talking about?
Yeah, but in terms of their responsibility, I'd like to think we're all responsible for trying to leave the world better than we found it, and I hope they look at that.
And I would say if you ask an industry to police itself, historically that doesn't usually work very well, so there might be space for regulations. But that's controversial, honestly.
Piggybacking off that a little bit.
Your shirt is amazing.
Yeah.
It's an Aladdin shirt for people who can't see it.
With all the studies coming from other countries at the moment, and kind of being new here in the States, is there anything being done that you're aware of to kind of overwatch or to regulate the fact that the same people in charge of diagnosing the addiction right now are also the same people trying to make it more addictive?
Wow, what a great question. The medicine, the psych medicine had some big sweeping regulations around that because the same people diagnosing people with, mood disorder were also getting huge payouts from companies that sold medications for mood disorder.
Oh, cool.
And then they would look them back in and be like, want to do some research? Oh, it turns out everyone has a mood disorder? Wow, you're going to have to be prescribing a lot of our medication. Here's a free dinner. They worked on that a few years ago. They may have to look at games in the same way soon enough.
So it's kind of building off that, but I think it's an important point. Should you be looking for a psychiatrist, a provider, it's public information how much money they've taken from pharmaceutical companies. So for example, if you look me up, I've taken 0 in New Jersey, and anywhere, because I live back in New Jersey. But there is one guy in New Jersey who's taken $2 million. And maybe you don't want to go to that guy, and maybe you want to ask your psychiatrist or your provider, it could be anyone, do you have any affiliations? Do you like a certain drug? I go out of my way to tell people, hey, listen, if this medication doesn't work for you, tell me, it's not going to hurt my feelings. I've got 20 antidepressants to try, and I don't care which one works for you. I want to find the one that helps you live your best life. So, try to find a provider who has that mentality.
A bit more of a clinical question. So there's a tension here between treating this as something that's very real and serious, while also not scaremongering and kind of overblowing it. I'm wondering how you will have that conversation with the patient, how you sort of navigate that.
I would say that that's something that's going to come up as you build a therapeutic relationship, because I think that the thing to understand about the DSM and diagnosis is that at least for us, for people who do a lot of therapy, it's really just a way to get paid. Truly, it's a way for insurance companies to view our work as legitimate. So it's really going to be case by case, and it's really important to kind of tease out exactly what's going on for that person and what else is going on for them. Are they eating because they're depressed, as you said, John, or are they eating because they have a latent personality disorder? I think it's just really important to not standardize, I would say.
Yeah.
Recognize that standards exist, but they're imperfect.
There's anyone who may need a change, there's this thing called the trans-theoretical model of change. And it starts with pre-contemplative, contemplative, then goes to preparing, action, and then maintenance of the change. So let's say I want to stop eating French fries. Let's say I want to lose weight. But I don't think French fries are the problem because I love them. They make me happy, therefore they are good, therefore I'll eat more French fries. I've been pre-contemplative. A good therapist would be like, so, how's it going with the French fries? Eating them all day. How's your blood pressure been? Pretty bad. How's your self-esteem? The worst. Do Do you think there might be some relationships there? So that's open-ended questions without pointing the finger. Because if someone's not even thinking it's a problem yet, you're not going to get anywhere by just saying, I want you to stop doing this. Here's your new plan, stop doing it. They have to think about what their issues are, believe that they want to change, and then start preparing to change. And then they need a lot of support on that, because that's hard. I could go on. That's not.
Is any advice, particularly who are feeling more defensive?
Yeah, open-ended, non-judgmental questions and helping them tell their own story. If you help someone tell their own story, and this is part of why we love games, because we feel like the game is helping us tell our own story a lot of the time. We get to work out our own stuff by running away from zombies or whatnot, because doesn't that feel real, Susan? Resident Evil 2?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that just a metaphor for how it feels a lot of the time these days? So if you help someone tell their own story, they will have oxytocin fire when they're around you, and they'll be able to handle harder questions a little bit easier. My pleasure.
I'm wondering about the role of adrenaline in the flow state versus fight or flight, especially like competitive games, something like that.
Sure.
So that, it's an interesting question. It's a really nuanced and intriguing question. Of all the doctors, the people who are most likely to become addicts while being doctors are anesthesiologists. The reason why that is twofold. One, they have access to a lot
All
of
the good shit.
All the good shit. It's right there. You turn around, you got some propofol, you got some ketamine. It's right there. The other reason is they have a job that is, quite frankly, extremely boring for long periods of time, and then they're hit with a moment. Oh my God, the patient's blood pressure is crashing. They're dying on the table. You need to push something to save their life right now. So they kind of have, and then this spike, and that in and of itself can lead someone to try to medicate that out. That is a very dangerous state to live in.
Yeah, speaking for myself and my blogging about video games addiction, can't believe I just said that. But I get such an adrenaline spike when I press live on a new story, and like, are people gonna like me? Are people gonna hate me? Is this gonna like help someone? Is this gonna hurt someone? I hope it doesn't hurt anybody. I've written things, people have been like, you're making the world a worse place because of your Pokemon opinions. Sorry. So it's like an adrenaline rush, and I know that. It's not all that healthy. In terms of in-games themselves though, in the flow state, I find most games leave the flow state as like the carrot at the end of the stick, and you have to have a bunch of fight or flight experiences to get there. And the fight or flight for oftentimes is the draw, because it's immediately stimulating. Flow state, you need to be good at a game usually to get there, which takes practice, and you won't get there unless they come up with a good fight or flight hook in the first place. Like, who here's playing Sekiro? Is that anybody? Yeah, so many like, you're about to die, until you get to the flow state, you're like, I am God, and then you want to get back to the God feeling again, until they come up with a new boss to make you feel terrified, and so that's kind of the system I see in successful games.
Good question. Last question, I'm afraid.
We'll be here afterwards, okay guys?
They'll linger, it's okay.
Yeah.
First, I want to say I appreciate you answering the coping question, because that was a great. Secondly, we have a question about recognizing addiction in young children. So, I have a family of gamers, and we all game very healthily. And but when my little brother was starting to, we didn't recognize that he was addicted until we saw like he was like 16 hours straight. And the computer was dirty, he was dirty. So the baby of the family, he's starting to do that. And he's starting to, we think, but we don't know what gaming addiction is. So you don't know when it's too late. So how do you stop it before it gets to that extreme?
Great question.
I would say if he's not taking care of himself, it might be worthwhile to make him referral to therapy. You don't have to label it as gaming addiction, honestly. I think that it could be valuable.
I had a question. Just about.
And I think the other answer is it's so hard, especially in children. Everything in my field gets so muddy when it comes to kids. Like everything changes. There's no hard and fast rules. Like Jeff said, if he's like dirty and if he's not taking care of his like physical oh, sorry.
That's what I've been using. I've been getting lots.
Oh, this is another person.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't couch it as we don't trust you. Kids are inherently lazy. they were going to want to do the fun thing and not do the unfun thing. This is why they need structure. This is why you give them chores. This is why you say you don't get to do X until you've done Y. And because otherwise they will only ever do X, right? So just providing structure, and then if he keeps to the structure, then guess what? He gets a game as much as he wants. And if he isn't sticking to the structure, we have rules, bro. You broke them. Guess what? You know, and putting it in very clear terms that makes, like, this is the behavior that will be rewarded, and this is the behavior that won't, and everybody agrees on it, and everybody agrees what that is. There's no room for judgment. There's no room for defensiveness. It's very cut and dried as to expectation versus outcome.
Don't sleep on behavior modification for kids. It works quite a bit.
Sure. How old is the kid? 8. Oh, yeah. It would be great if he could start talking about, he or she could start talking about why they want to play the game, how they feel when they play it. I don't know, there's a study, if I remember correctly, if somebody visualizes eating steak, their brain will think they ate a steak. So if you're on a diet and you're like, I love steaks, if you spend like 15 minutes meditating on like, just close your eyes for now, I'm seeing the red come out of the... So if the kid, instead of playing them, talks to you about, like, this is why I love this game, here's how I feel when I'm playing it, here's what I can't wait to do, they'll get some of that in their head. It'll feel like they played it. I mean, how many times have I written about a game and had just as much fun writing about it as I did playing it? I don't know if that's, because you're engaging with it in a different way, so you don't have to engage with it directly in order to get the same fun from it. And it's also healthy. Now you're socializing, you're talking about how you feel, you're self-analyzing, you're getting to know yourself and the people with you. Can help. 8's a little young, but you can try.
Thank you. Great question. And we are out of time. Everybody, thank you so much.